January the 23rd, 1997, 66-year-old Hazel Backwell went to bed as usual, but it was to be the worst night of her life.
It's hard to think of a more serious offence other than the taking of a life. This woman was beaten, raped, stuffed into a tiny cupboard and left for dead.
The man who raped Hazel was arrested, but despite compelling DNA evidence, Wendell Baker was freed on a legal technicality.
I think Hazel felt they'd caught the man who'd committed this awful crime against her, and then she was told that she would not get justice. She was extremely angry and confused.
But all that could change. There could still be justice for Hazel.
Hazel's story is brutal and it's distressing, but we think it's important that the full facts are shown to you.
We believe we have found enough evidence for a second trial, that the attacker who left an elderly woman for dead should come back to court under the new Double Jeopardy rule.
Wendell Baker, my name's Richard Bilton and I work for the BBC. I've come to talk to you about Hazel Backwell. We think we've found new evidence which means that you should stand trial again. What do you think, Mr. Baker?
Fuck off! Get out my face! Fuck off!
It's 6 o'clock on Monday, the 16th of June. Good morning. This is Today with James Naughtie and Sarah Montague.
The Criminal Justice Bill arrives in the Lords today. It's going to have a rough passage.
In the Double Jeopardy, which comes into effect next week.
New laws allowing suspects who've been acquitted to be prosecuted.
The Double Jeopardy rule that stops people being tried.
In 2005, the 800-year-old Double Jeopardy rule was swept away. Up until that time, anyone found not guilty stayed not guilty. They could never be tried again for the same crime. But that has gone. If there's new evidence of guilt in a crime that's so serious it involves a life sentence, there can now be a second trial for the same crime.
I am going on a journey to test this case, to see if the rape of Hazel Backwell can be tried again under these new Double Jeopardy rules. But first I need to find the evidence to put the man who viciously attacked an elderly woman back in the dock, so that justice can finally be done.
When we set out to investigate this case, we immediately hit a problem, naming the man who attacked Hazel. We had to overturn a House of Lords anonymity order that prevents him from being identified with the crime. Unlike any other rape defendant, he is being offered the protection of the law, as if he were a rape victim.
We think that, given the facts of this case, that's just wrong and not in the public interest. Now, in a historic ruling, the House of Lords unanimously agreed to lift the anonymity order. They said, in this instance, the BBC's right to free expression outweighed the individual's right to privacy.
We are now free to name the attacker. This is the real Wendell Baker. We have dramatised the events of this story, but the film is based on the facts of the case taken from interviews and court documents. And this is the real Hazel Backwell. Hazel died in 2002, 5 years after the attack on her. Those who know her case say she has been let down by the law.
I don't usually feel very strongly about the stories that I report upon. I sort of keep that at arm's length. But in this case, I felt very upset for her.
Hazel Backwell had lived in the same house for 30 years, an end terrace in Stratford, East London. She was 66, living alone on a state pension, but happy here. Wendell Baker is a very different character. In and out of trouble with the police, a crack cocaine user with a history of violence. He'd recently been convicted for a fray. He was also a married man, the father of 4 daughters. But on one night 12 years ago, the paths of these two people would come face to face, and what happened destroyed Hazel's life.
Hazel had lived in the same house for 30 years. She enjoyed sharing it with her cat. She liked knitting, pottering around the garden, seeing friends locally. She was friendly with a lot of the neighbours.
Hazel was a lovely, warm, welcoming woman, very calm, sort of almost grandmotherly sort of woman, really. Very easy to talk to, very easy to get along with. I just feel outraged about when you consider that this is a woman who was asleep in her own bed, in the comfort of her own home, found herself being beaten, robbed, sexually assaulted, raped, stuffed into a tiny cupboard and left for dead.
Hazel's peace and security was shattered on the 23rd of January 1997.
On the night of the attack, she listened to a discussion programme on the radio. She liked LBC. She then feed her cat and then take herself to bed.
Hazel slept on the ground floor.
Hazel was woken by a noise in her bedroom. She looked at the alarm clock and saw that it was 4 a.m. She was about to go back to sleep, but when she turned, she saw a man standing.
She asked who he was, and he shouted, "Turn over, roll over, don't look at me."
And from then on, things just got worse and worse for her.
He then ripped the flex from the alarm clock and used that to tie her hands together behind her back.
He then started hitting her, punching with his fist, her mouth filled with blood.
She just thought, when is this going to end? What's going to happen next? When is he going to leave me alone?
The next stage of the attack was by far the most horrendous part of it. He said to her that he was going to have sex with her, rape her, and he raped her anally.
She was terrified and felt degraded, and she believed she was going to die.
There was more he wanted from Hazel.
I want your PIN number, PIN number.
And during the course of the rape, he was shouting to her for her PIN number to her bank card.
He kept shouting and bellowing at her, "PIN number, PIN number."
PIN number, PIN number, PIN number.
PIN number. And of course, she was absolutely, she was just terrified.
PIN number.
But Hazel didn't have a bank card or a PIN number.
She didn't have much money. She only had a few pounds that she'd set to one side to pay for vet's fees should her cat fall ill.
He searched the house and found what little money she had. But before he escaped, Baker turned his attention back to Hazel.
He violently dragged her out of the bedroom and into the hallway. In the hallway, he'd opened a door to a very small cupboard that was too small to fit her inside, without first removing a vacuum cleaner and a toolbox.
It was one last act of cruelty. Baker piled boxes in front of the door to prevent Hazel escaping.
And then he placed a Yale lock on the inside of the door so that it was impossible for anybody from the outside to use a key to gain entrance to her address. She was knelt down in the dark in a tiny space and described herself feeling as if she was going to suffocate. And of course, she had no knowledge of when she would ever be released from that cupboard. She was extremely frightened and traumatized.
Help me. Please, please help me.